So after months and months of rumour, speculation, more rumour, and even some outright tosh, AMD has finally announced the launch of its new Radeon 7000 series of graphics cards. Well, the 7900 series at least. The world's first chiplet-based gaming GPUs. In a similar move to what Nvidia did, AMD has kicked things off with their top tier offerings, which means that, once again, we only have 2 GPUs to look forward to in the immediate future. But in terms of what they did showcase during their announcement, well, let's just say that if I was Nvidia, I'd be very, very worried. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor. Hello mate, you alright? Yeah, just got all the bits from my banging new gaming PC. Just got to put it together. It's going to be so much better than yours. Oh, right. What did you get then? The latest Intel 12th gen processor, a feature-packed motherboard, and 32 gig of DDR4 memory. See? Miles ahead of yours. You realise that board needs DDR5 memory, don't you? Don't tell me you went and bought the wrong stuff. DDR4 is so 2014. I can't believe you was that stupid. What? No, you're joking. What should I get then? For me, I'd be looking at Corsair's newest Vengeance DDR5 kits, or if you're wanting that all-important RGB, then go for the Dominator Platinum RGB. Oh, you are a lifesaver, thanks, but where can I find out more? By clicking the link in the description below, of course. And you call me the stupid one. Unlike AMD, who kept us waiting for nearly an hour before they finally told us the key information, availability and price, we're just going to get straight into it. The Radeon 7900 XT and 7900 XTX will both be released on December the 13th for a price of $899 and $999 respectively. No, while they didn't offer any comparative gaming benchmarks, the bottom line, quite literally, is that AMD's top tier 7900 GPUs are set to massively undercut both the RTX 4090 and 4080. So yeah, that's the big stuff done, I guess. But wait, don't click onto your next video just yet, as this is literally just the tip of the iceberg. AMD revealed a lot more excellent stuff. Let's be honest though, if this was a newspaper, those price tags would probably take the headline. So we might as well move on to what I guess we think was the second biggest announcement. AMD Radeon 7900 series will offer full DisplayPort 2.1 support, something that even Nvidia's 4000 series doesn't have. What does this actually mean though? Well, thanks to the massively improved bandwidth offered by the new cabling standard, this will allow gamers to access ridiculously high frame rates and at larger resolutions simultaneously, such as 8K at 165Hz. AMD even said that this will see a number of popular titles hit their maximum cap limit, so maybe it's time for devs to maybe rethink their game engines moving forward. Why is this important though? Well, while everyone loves nice, fast, silky smooth frame rates, there's one community that simply needs it, namely esports and competitive gamers. Now, I don't personally play on that kind of level. In fact, I don't actually come anywhere close to that kind of level. I mean, eTeknix game night every other Saturday for Patreon members, if you really want to see how bad I can be, proves just that. Now, with that being said though, it's not exactly a secret that esports enthusiasts simply need access to the highest FPS they can get. These are the kind of people who deal in milliseconds with their decision making, and seeing frame rates produced faster allows them to, at least in theory, because again, I'm no expert, make much smarter choices in their gameplay. I should highlight once again though that this is one key thing that Nvidia doesn't currently have, nor indeed will they get unless they refresh their only just released 4090 and upcoming RTX 4080. Put simply, as things stand right now, none of their current 4000 series of GPUs will offer DisplayPort 2.1 compatibility, meaning that AMD, in pretty much one fell swoop, has pretty much cornered the competitive gaming market with the Radeon 7900 series. And yes, I get that HDMI 2.1 is on Nvidia 4000 series GPUs, but AMD have that too. So 1-0 to AMD on this one. And no, there won't be any DisplayPort 2.1 monitors until at least early 2023. But this doesn't really matter right now. Right now, it's an AMD exclusive and seems set to be that way for at least the next year. Of course though, I'm just giving you a brief rundown of all the major announcements made at the event, and if you want all the bite-sized chunks, we suggest that you check the link in the description. So trying to keep this nice and concise though, the third biggest announcement was the launch of FSR 3.0. Representing AMD's alternative to Nvidia's DLSS, FSR 3.0 is definitely looked to take what was already decent-ish into a much more potent evolution, with supported gaming titles potentially set to see massive frame rate increases when it's turned on. And speaking of games, AMD confirmed that within the next 12 months, at least 216 titles will offer full FSR support. Again, hitting Nvidia where it hurts, since their own support rollout for DLSS has been, well, sluggish at best. Finally though, if you watched the presentation, then I dare say you picked up on a particular keyword that AMD was very clearly kind of trying to hammer home: efficiency. Hell, I think they said efficiency more often than Nvidia said Ti at the 3090 Ti launch.
The RTX 3090 Ti, 3080 Ti laptop GPU, 3090 Ti, Ti class of GPUs, 3080 Ti, 3080 Ti laptops, 70 Ti laptops, Ti.
I think it's fair to say that AMD doesn't think its GPUs are going to compete performance-wise with Nvidia's RTX 4090, possibly not even with their 4080. Then again, nobody really expected them to beat those cards anyway. Sure, we hope that AMD could possibly make something, say, magical happen, but most of us in the tech world are realists. For AMD to beat Nvidia in an outright non-rasterization grunty matchup, they'd need to take a generational holiday to catch up. With that being said though, if AMD couldn't beat them in this area, they could at least look to challenge them in terms of power requirements. Firstly, no, the AMD Radeon 7000 series will not require any 12V HPWR adapters, a point that rather briefly but notably mentioned during their showcase as something of an inside joke for those aware of the ongoing problem this cable might be giving Nvidia 4090 owners.
And there's no need for a new power adapter.
And yes, we're still doing our own research into this, and if worthy, we'll be making a video on that in the near future. You know, without all the scaremongering. Secondly though, they never once called the 7900 XTX the world's greatest GPU. They instead used the terminology of the world's most advanced GPU. And part of this undoubtedly comes down to better efficiency than, well, Nvidia. Presuming that we can compare the 7900 XT to the 4080 and 7900 XTX to the 4090, both of AMD's GPUs will come with notably lower TBP requirements. This means they require less power, which hopefully will mean you don't have to worry about your PSU wattage output or any fancy cables. In fact, the 7900 XT will be coming in at 300 watts, while the beefier 7900 XTX comes in with a max wattage of 355 watts, which is much lower than the 450 watt and upwards of the RTX 4090. Additionally, due to these lower power constraints, the GPUs are nowhere near as chunky or long as Nvidia's 4090, meaning that case compatibility shouldn't be any kind of an issue whatsoever. I mean, to put that into perspective, we had to create an article over on eTeknix.com going through which cases can comfortably house a 4090. I never thought we'd be in a situation where that was even a thing. Again though, efficiency. AMD said it again and again and again, and really had all the details to back this up. If you can't make a faster GPU than Nvidia, why not simply make a better one? And for all accounts, this is exactly what AMD has seemingly done here. It's all about performance per watt, especially as the cost of electricity has gone through the roof all across the world. And something we were even begged to add into our GPU content, the cost of running one GPU compared to the next. In fact, AMD was so hot on efficiency that they are claiming a huge 54% improvement generation over generation when looking at the performance per watt, which is a similar gain to what we saw moving from RDNA to RDNA 2. And this mainly comes down to the process node used for these RDNA 3 based GPUs. And this is, I guess, the other interesting part, as unlike Nvidia, we don't have a single huge GPU core slapped onto a PCB. But instead, we see something that is seemingly working for AMD on the Ryzen 7000 Zen 4 lineup, with a chiplet design, making these new RDNA 3 based cards the world's first chiplet based GPUs. Without getting too technical, what this means is that the RDNA 3 based cards are now split between the graphics chiplet die, or GCD, which is where you'll find the main compute units and raw graphical processing power, and multiple memory chiplet dies, or MCDs, which include the memory controllers and, of course, the Infinity Cache. Now, while the two models of GPUs are, I guess, very similar in name, this is where things get interesting, where you can clearly see a difference, unlike the 4080 12GB 16GB debacle. And it's where we find the 7900 XTX coming in with a single GCD, comprising of 96 compute units running at a 2.3 GHz game clock, and along with that, 6 MCD units. while the 7900 XT has a slightly cut down GCD, which houses 84 compute units running at a 2 GHz game clock and 5 MCD units. Now, another key area is that while the GCD portion is made on the 5nm process node, the smaller MCDs are made using the 6nm node, which, when you think about it, makes sense, as it means AMD are less reliant on the latest and more expensive silicon for those parts, which I guess in turn brings down the cost of the cards, which then the savings can be passed on to the consumer. Now, one big area comes down to memory and the interface, in what seems like a move to give maybe another little dig to Nvidia, as both cards will feature more memory than the RTX 4080, at 16GB on the 7900 XT and 24GB on the 7900 XTX, matching the RTX 4090. What is more interesting though is that both cards will still be utilising the PCI Express 4.0 interface, which I do get because we're not even close to saturating the bandwidth of it yet. But those who have bought shiny new X670E or Z790 based motherboards will be wondering why they've paid all this money for functionality that can't be utilised from both AMD or Nvidia. Now, to keep up with the competition, AMD have also introduced a new dual media engine, meaning that we now get encoding and decoding for AV1 at 8K 60, along with simultaneous encoding and decoding for the likes of AVC and HEVC codecs. Personally, this is something nice to see as, gaming aside, Nvidia have definitely had the upper hand when it comes to work-related tasks, including CUDA acceleration within rendering, and of course the NVENC encoder, which is a favourite for streamers. Maybe AMD are looking to level the playing field a little there too. So what about performance though? Well, as we mentioned earlier, AMD sadly didn't offer us any kind of firm comparative performance figures. Well, beyond the fact that the 7900 XTX will outperform the 6950 XT by a margin of around 70%. But what does this actually mean though? Well, using some known benchmarking results, this would suggest that when pitted against the 4090, the 7900 XTX will fall short by a margin of around 20%. Now, this is very rough maths, and that figure might actually be better or worse. But this does raise a key point for why we think, ultimately, AMD may have truly won the current gen GPU war. Even if the 7900 XTX falls 20% short of the 4090, its comparative price tag is over 35% less expensive. AMD has always been experts at bang for buck. You only have to look at the success seen in the Ryzen platform. And presuming these figures play out as we admittedly roughly calculated, then while it might lose in performance to the Nvidia RTX 4090, it should thoroughly spank it in terms of cost per frame. You know me, I'm all about value for money. And this looks to be even more true if FSR 3.0 is as impressive as AMD claims. Now, the other area of performance that I guess AMD lacked in before was ray tracing, which was touched on very briefly, where AMD's second generation RT accelerator is said to give up to 50% more performance per compute unit when compared to the previous generation. This was always AMD's shortcoming when compared to the competition, mainly due to the lack of dedicated AI accelerators like we see from Nvidia. Though this new design now includes 2 AI accelerators per compute unit, which gives new AI instructions and improved AI throughput, which apparently gives up to 2.7 times the performance. But compared to what is very unclear. 2.7 times more performance than not having something? Yeah, I'm sure we'll find out more on this as, we draw closer to the launch. So what conclusions can we draw? Well, while the performance of the Nvidia 4090 was undoubtedly impressive, the 1,599 MSRP left the door thoroughly open for AMD to try and see if they could manage to win some hearts and minds with their Radeon 7000 series. And based on what we saw last night, AMD didn't merely peek their head through the door, they kicked the bloody thing off its hinges. And in regards to timing, this couldn't be worse for Nvidia, especially given that their consumer perception and reputation are arguably at an all-time low. They didn't impress anyone with how the 3000 series was always out of stock. They didn't impress anyone when it was found that they were deliberately selling GPUs to miners to boost profits. And they certainly didn't impress their investors when they tried to claim that their record sales were from actual consumer sales from you and me. Throw that in with what can only be called ridiculous price tags for their 4090 and 4080 graphics cards, and even the most ardent of Nvidia fans have been seeing their loyalty waning. And then on top of that, we have the power adapter saga, let's call it that. And no, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of that arguably deliberately accidentally misbranded 4080 12GB either. Nvidia fooled no one with that one. Now, I'm not trying to deliberately dump on Nvidia here, but there are no other words for it. Over the last 2 years, Nvidia have treated their customers a bit like dirt. With these new AMD Radeon 7900 graphics cards though, consumers may finally have a truly viable high-end alternative, and more so, one that actually, dare I say, offers you significantly better value for money. We had high hopes for AMD's new Radeon 7000 series. Many consumers truly prayed that it would save us from Nvidia's price gouging, and from what we saw last night, AMD may have just hit the ball right out of the park. Remember, even if you think $1,000 is a lot to spend on a GPU, which it is, this is the top end of AMD's offerings. When something like the 7700 XT drops, surely that's only going to be around $500, which by today's standards is practically a bargain. Yes, AMD, consider us here over at eTeknix incredibly impressed. Nvidia's greed gave you every opportunity to impress us, and you've taken full advantage of it. I guess we just need to see exactly how it performs when we get cards in our offices. Because as always, figures from a brand showing their product and how much better it is than the previous generation, well, it's something that you have to kind of take with a pinch of salt. But if it's even close to being accurate, then damn, Nvidia really could be in trouble. What do you think though? Has AMD hit a home run here? Are you now thinking of AMD for your next GPU upgrade? What about those incredibly solid price tags? Let us know down below. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, then a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, consider supporting us over on Patreon, where you'll get access to a ton of goodies, including that bi-weekly game night, the super exclusive behind the scenes content, and much, much more. The link for all that is down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.